Welcome to Uploading, the podcast where we take you behind the wheel with the world's best creators, marketers, and professionals who have cracked the code on how to profit through content. You'll learn the ins and outs of content strategy, creation, production, distribution, growth, platforms, tools, and more. If you haven't already, be sure to join Cast Magic, the all-in-one content workspace for professionals. We'll be sending out tips from our shows in our weekly newsletter, and we've also got a Slack community of over 1,000 creators, so make sure to drop in and say hello. And now, get ready for the show. Welcome to this episode of Uploading, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Philip Ruffini, who is the head of media at Rupa Health. We're really excited to talk with Philip because Philip's been a guest on our other podcast, DTC Pod, and he's an absolute content expert. He's run an agency, done over 100 million views on social. And now since then, he's moved into the B2B space and just absolutely crushing it in content. So Philip, before I mess anything else up, I'm going to let you kick it off. Why don't you just introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your background and what you're working on?
Yeah, so my name is Philip. Background that I think is relevant to this is used to run my own e-commerce business in college. I sold it. Then I went to go be a product manager at Microsoft, where I worked on an operating system and app store. That was the most miserable thing I've ever done. So I left, but learned a ton about product. Left to go do a startup, didn't work out. And then I spent a year and a half doing growth consulting. And I realized that companies were really, really bad at making organic content. I had grown my LinkedIn to sell a course. I had grown my TikTok for fun. And then was working with Alchemy, which is a Web3 blockchain company. They were doing really well with content. So essentially I was like, short form media, super important. You make a TikTok account, you can get 1 million views. I'm going to go start an agency selling short form video marketing for tech companies. So I was basically the only former Microsoft product manager going around selling 5-figure a month TikTok marketing contracts to post Series A startups. So I worked with companies like Maven, Wayflyer, True Classic, which isn't a tech company, and a bunch of others. And then I ran that agency for literally only 8 months. And then I got to the point where I was like, what am I doing with my life? Just because agencies don't have a ton of fulfillment, you're not really get to build anything long term, and you don't really see compounding results. Because even with my best clients, one of my best customers turned after 3 months because it was a crypto company and US regulations changed and we couldn't do it anymore. Then Tara Viswanathan, who's the CEO of Rupa Health, is one of my close friends. And her CMO, or head of growth, Kobe Conrad, was basically helping me with my agency because he used to run his own. And then they convinced me to come build a media business at Rupa Health instead. So now I just do that. And at Rupa Health, I'm in charge of our magazine, which is a blog, but we call it a magazine because doctors want to write for a magazine, not a blog. Our newsletter, our podcast, and most of our social media like YouTube, LinkedIn, and then work with someone else on our Instagram and Facebook. And the whole goal is, how do we build an audience of 1 million doctors?
I love that. I think we're going to have a whole bunch to unpack here because, like you're saying, when you're thinking about media, there's all these channels you're supervising. You need to build a really complex content strategy. And quite frankly, the content landscape has evolved and a lot of B2B businesses are, trying to catch up. And we like talking to the ones that are really innovating in the space. So I know you hit on a bunch of the channels that you're doing and a bunch of the little things, but why don't we start with when you enter Rupa, what are the first items on your plate that you want to build as you think about, running the head of media? What's everything that you have to get in place, and how do you set things up operationally for success?
So before I started, one of the reasons I took the job is because I think Kobe, is the head of growth, is the best marketer I've ever met. Kobe was the one who started the podcast, which is going to be profitable by the end of this year, meaning despite all of our costs on it, it's going to make more money than it costs. But so pretty much my first job was basically go figure out YouTube. So our whole goal is, we had the magazine that was doing pretty well and was a pretty linear trajectory. But the podcast, it's hard to grow a podcast because there's no growth channel. So my job was to go figure out YouTube. So essentially I built a team of 10 doctors that all started making YouTube videos for us. And then I had 6 full-time video editors editing those videos. And we basically had to just test and figure out what worked. Because when I started, our YouTube videos averaged less than 100 views, like most companies. And now they probably average at least 2,500. We've gotten ones that are 20, 30,000. But the content strategy we went with is we do hour-long lectures that are deep medical topics. So at first we started with really simple, small ones and realized no one cared. So we now basically take like world-renowned doctors who have given lectures, like conferences or at universities, and then we pay them to just take their lecture content they've already created, record it into a video, and then we add world-class like animators and professional video editors to the videos to post. And we do at least probably one video every other day. And then it was just figuring out how do we like combine all of our channels. Like our Facebook page was at 400,000 followers, but not really growing. Instagram was at 110,000 followers, but not really growing. And the podcast was like super stagnant. So since then, I think like a lot of doing like content well is like having one source of like one or two sources of like original content. And then like, how do you combine them? Right. Like it is a lot of effort to like use your big Facebook page or Instagram at like page to drive traffic to podcasts because people don't want to leave a platform. So we have, I think, 13 people full time in the Philippines that help run everything. So, like for example, with our LinkedIn, I found a venture-backed founder that uses Rupa Health as API for his company. Wanted to build a better relationship with Rupa Health. Has like 10,000 Twitter followers. He ghostwrites our LinkedIn content, and then I have a VA in the Philippines who actually posted it and manage it in real time because I refuse to schedule anything because I think scheduling on LinkedIn like actually hurts engagement. So I was doing a lot of that, and like going through a bunch of different video editors. Like I have one video editor whose full-time job is to just watch our podcast and cut clips from it. And I was super skeptical that someone could like pick out clips and edit them really well because every time I've seen it, it's kind of like been two people. But just got really lucky with that. And then, then we have a VA based in Central America and then someone in the Philippines who posts those clips to LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. So we have a podcast agency that edits our podcast. They send us the video and then all of the VAs know when they get the email to basically like go through that and then manage all the posts. So I just write really, really, really detailed SOPs for everyone to follow. Like, hey, Julius, you get the podcast clip, you cut it up, and then you give it to Sam and Veronica, and they post it. And just really detailed SOPs and loops.
There is so much to unpack there. I want to take a step back into the first thing you said, which was it is going to be ROI positive. So, what does that mean internally? What does ROI success look like for you when you're running a B2B media operation? And how are you measuring the ROI of the investment? Because you're not necessarily taking sponsors or anything like that.
Yeah. So, a couple things. One, like content's really hard. Companies don't want to spend money on content because it's like a risk, right? Like if you start a TikTok account, like it's really, really hard to generate like a positive ROI. Like we spend way more money probably on our YouTube channel than we make, but it's like really quick side story. Like we do weekly live classes. So doctors come in and give weekly live classes. So I went to a conference and I was at the conference and some doctor comes up to me and they're like, I just wanted to say thank you because I love watching your weekly live classes. And I was like, oh, like, do you know we also post them to YouTube every week? And she's like, oh, I'm going to go watch them on my TV. Then she's like, I love this doctor from like Colorado. So I like go to one of the people on the team and I was like, Adrian, who was this person, like this doctor in Colorado that made the video. Because if this person's willing to come to me in a conference to say that they like this one person in Colorado, like they have to be really good. So I like reach out to the doctor in Colorado. I was like, hey, do you want to make more videos with us? We get on the call. It turns out she was the doctor for a world famous athlete. She does like cutting edge research. She sends it to 2,000 doctors a month. And like when we got on the call, she was in the middle of like watching a video of like a hormone expert of like a video I made with like someone else. So it's like, the doctor everyone likes is already watching our videos and like sends all of her research out and like wants to make videos for us. And it's like, okay, if this woman who's emailing her research to 2,000 other doctors every month is watching our YouTube videos, like I don't care if it gets 100 views. Like she's one of them, and that's worth so much more, right? But to answer your question directly, like positive ROI on the podcast. Basically the podcast. So we track Rupa Health is a marketplace for lab test ordering. So we're basically tracking what percentage of our GMV in the marketplace. So what amount of money in orders per month is directly attributed to the podcast. So doctors who place order in our marketplace, what percentage of that GMV came from people who said they heard about it from the podcast? The profit on that GMV by the end of this year will definitely be higher than what we spend every month on the podcast to produce, paying the podcast host, advertising it on Facebook, the editors who edit it, the agency. And that is only attributable GMV, right? And the only way we attribute it is when people sign up for Rupa Health, they mark, we heard about Rupa Health from the podcast. It is definitely higher than that, like 100%. But if you use this lowest metric, like it took 2 years, but it's going to. Also, we're going to sell ad sponsorships on the podcast, and that is going to easily surpass our costs.
Yeah, I love that. I think thinking about it that way, and it's something Ramon and I talk about all the time in terms of attribution, right? Where you you're looking for how do you quantify something, and right now, like some of the best way is like a simple like type form or something. How'd you hear about us? But podcasting, especially YouTube, there's so many other ways to like drive traffic that becomes non-attributable. So I think just as a content creator, if you're thinking about hitting a baseline that's like, let me break even or just demonstrate a little bit of profit, clearly the ROI is going to be more than that if you think of it in the long term and and all the compounding effects that your content will have. Philip, one thing that I wanted to go over with you was you mentioned YouTube, right? This was kind of, I know when we had talked and you were running the agency, you guys were really focused on TikTok, on shorter form, and now you like stood up everything on YouTube. What's your YouTube strategy, I guess? Like, how do you, like, what was it like launching the YouTube channel and what did you need to do to get it right? Like you said, you took it from like 100 to 200 views to 1,000 views. I know you mentioned you have a couple different editors doing it. Like, how much a lift is it to like really grow YouTube and how did you guys pull it off?
Oh, it's so much harder. Doing YouTube is literally so much harder than short form because the benefit with short form. So I originally did like TikTok, Instagram, and I think basically what channel you want to use depends on your audience, right? Like, so for us, LinkedIn is way better for us than Twitter. Twitter is basically all consumers, but all the people I engage with our LinkedIn posts are like really practitioners, dietitians, all these people who use Rupa Health. So for YouTube, it was basically like, all right, we would rather do like YouTube has more longevity, right? So it's more valuable. Like if you make a TikTok, it gets 1 million views. After 30 days, no one's probably ever going to see it again. Versus like YouTube, it like continuously racks up views. There was videos published before I started that took 300 days, and it went from like 0 to 500 in 300 days, then 500 to 10,000 once we started posting more. YouTube is significantly harder because you just have longer lead times. So our videos that are an hour long basically have a 6 to 8 week lead time. I come up with an idea. I ask a doctor to make it. They then basically make an outline slash lecture for the video, record it. That's 2 weeks. And then it takes the video editor 2 to 4 to edit that hour long video. So it's like, we recently had one video do super, super, super well. And it's like, we have to do more of those. It's basically 8 weeks until we get to that point because I've already made 5 videos that are like, haven't even been edited. So figuring it out, it's like just testing as much as humanly possible. It's like testing the intro, testing the middle. And YouTube's harder just because like it doesn't make sense as much. Like short form, it's like, if you get your retention past like 60% based on X amount of time, like it's really easy to go viral. Like if your video is longer than 30 seconds and you have more than 50% retention, you'll probably get 100,000 views. And it's like very clear, just retention on watch time equals numbers of views. Whereas like YouTube, I got really frustrated lately because our best performing video right now has like a worse click through rate and a worse like watch time versus other videos of ours, but it's doing really, really well. And it's because of the topic, it's more browsable, more trending, searchable. So it's a lot more frustrating, but yeah, it's just hyper testing everything. And then once you find something that works, like, we found a topic that worked and we went to ChatGPT and we're like, okay, this topic worked really well. These topics worked really well for a YouTube video. Give us 20 other things that are all related to these 3 to go make videos on. And then I ping my network of doctors and I'm like, hey, can anybody make videos on these?
Wow, this is really cool. Just between the network of doctors and I mean, you're building the system from scratch, iterating as you go. This isn't a blueprint. This isn't like, a plug and play with an existing agency. I have 2 questions. One is, do you ever pick the keywords, etc., the titles from the SEO and like the search volume and work backwards? And also, I think I'm just listening to the conversation on how you're talking on short form. And like, I think we kind of skipped saying that you've already generated over 100 million views on short form. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I doing
Yeah.
marketing for companies doing short form, but there's just like short form has a low ROI where it's like really expensive. Making videos, the time, the editing, the posting, you kind of got to do one a day. But the long-term value isn't there as much. So that's why I think YouTube's better. To answer your first question though, around search volume SEO. So, like our top magazine article is what is heart rate variability, which is basically how your heart beats. The problem is there's a ton of content on YouTube about that. So it's way more competitive at keyword. So I don't think it actually works one to one. What's worked for us, and this addresses Blaine's earlier question, which is like, how do we kickstart YouTube? Our magazine gets like, 500,000 plus visits a month. What we do is whenever we make YouTube videos, we append the video to the bottom of the magazine article. So this is super cool. One article on gallstones that gets like 30,000 visits a month. That article takes about 15, 20 minutes to read. We then put the YouTube video that is on gallstones at the bottom of that article. People read that entire article and then click the link and watch that entire video. And that is just like, dude, even if that's only 10 people, that's so powerful because that means that person is spending 30 minutes of their time with you. And that means they like and trust you. Yeah, short form just I think doesn't have as long a like brand. I mean, it really just depends. Like if you're a D2C company, probably shouldn't be doing YouTube. You should go do short form. So I think it really just depends on your target audience.
My other question, Philip, was going to be in terms of like what you were talking about, the editor and the production time on that YouTube stuff. Like how much from getting the actual lecture to like the production, like what goes into your production to create the publishable asset that you're posting to YouTube?
Oh,
Like how much animation, how much editing, how much B-roll, like what's going into the final
so
product?
my whole philosophy on content is like now, and it's changed, is like don't do scripted. Let people just make what they really enjoy. So I basically tell the doctors like, yo, go do whatever you want. Like there is too much opportunity. I'm like the nicheness of medicine of these people I work with that like, they all want to do different stuff, right? And I don't have a medical background. I can tell you what's trending. Like I'm just really good at pattern matching across LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Google keywords. I'm like, all right, methylation is I've seen methylation now on every single channel. Like, let's go make 3 videos of methylation and see how it does. And it's like, just go do whatever makes you happy, right? Um, like one of our videos was on GLP-1, which is doing really well, which GLP-1 is a peptide. It's basically like kind of the off brand. It's like the non-name brand version of Ozempic, right? That's why it's doing really well because Ozempic's but oh man. Anyway, got really excited, went down a rabbit hole. I'm very much like kind of let the doctors do basically whatever they want. Oh, production time on the YouTube videos. Sorry about that. I basically do nothing. So I got really lucky. And when I wasn't looking for a job and Rupa Health asked me to work with them. So I got to bring I had 16 full-time animators at my marketing agency. The 5 best ones all came to work with me full-time at Rupa Health. So I've been working with all these editors. They're all based in the Philippines for over a year. One of the girls I worked with was president of like the #1 film school in the Philippines. And she basically does everything for me. So the doctors create the video. I tell them you can mess up as much as you want. I have them all filming into script. I taught them all how to use the script. They just share their project folder with me, go into the project folder, create a new project. So whenever they make it, I instantly have access to it. So if there's any issues or they think they messed up, I'm able to actually view what's wrong instead of them having to download the video, upload to Google Drive, share it. So they upload it to the script. I download it from the script. I apply like studio sound. I put it in Dropbox, and then I basically have a Notion that all my video editors self-manage from that Notion. So I put in video title, thumbnail, like what to put on the thumbnail, and then I put the doctor's name and then the headers, and then the video editors just go in and grab a video whenever it's free. Takes them about 2 weeks, and then we just have a monthly creative review meeting. So basically, I'll go in and I'll watch all the videos, and I create a loom giving feedback on all the videos, what I like, what I don't like, what we have to be consistent, where are the inconsistencies. And then I have 2 editors review every single video to make sure all of them are the same and on brand.
Awesome. And then my next question was going to be about how does YouTube and that content strategy? I know you've got the magazine, you've got the doctors doing the lecture, you've got your long form on YouTube. How does this fit within the broader ecosystem of your content strategy? I know you mentioned newsletter and some other channels. Like, where else are you distributing, and how are you like managing content for those other
Yeah.
channels?
So our slogan is we create content for practitioners that is consumed by consumers. We ultimately want to make really in-depth medical content like Peter Attia, but that still layman terms explanation so consumers can find them. Because our whole goal is how do we monopolize all of the content in functional medicine. So essentially, like what we do is we have LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, which are like really good awareness channels to grow on. Then we have YouTube and the magazine. So pretty much, and then we have the podcast that we publish twice a week. So we publish 1 new episode a week and then 1 rerun every week for the podcast. The podcast we post about now. We do an Instagram story, a Facebook post, an Instagram post, and a LinkedIn post. Um, the LinkedIn, the LinkedIn has its own ghostwriter. So the LinkedIn content is strictly for practitioners. Facebook and Instagram is more for both consumers and practitioners just because of the nature of the platform. But a lot of the Instagram and Facebook content, most of it is actually just repurposed podcast content. So we have someone go in the podcast and pull out quotes from the transcript and then post about it. Then we tag in all the posts, all the doctors who are guests. The YouTube videos get pushed to our Facebook audience, which is 400,000 people. And then they also get plugged in all the magazines. That is basically, I think, all of like flywheels. And then we have a newsletter. So then in the newsletter, we publish all of our magazine articles that get published that week. And then we publish our YouTube videos as well. And the way we do it, and this is freaking genius, I did not come up with this, but we gatekeep our magazine content. So after you read 3 magazine articles, a pop-up comes up. So you have to input your email to sign up for our newsletter to keep reading magazine articles.
Is that working? Is it getting leads?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that alone has built
Man, you're
a 30,000 plus email, and then we segment those people if they're a practitioner or a consumer.
That's huge. I'm taking notes as I'm like listening to you, and I don't often do that. I'm like taking notes on my computer and in my notebook. But you're preaching to the choir in terms of the long form. And, I have conversations with creators and they'll tell me, well, I don't want to start a podcast. I don't want to start a YouTube. It's a ton of work. I'm like, no, you have it backwards. Like the long form can feed all of your other content and you can get it all done at once. So what is your view on that? On like repurposing specifically? What is the best way to repurpose?
Yeah. So I've been definitely 50-50 on this because for example, I'm not a huge fan of posting podcast clips to like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, because I just like don't think it works super well as like versus like scripting something designed to like get a ton of views, right? Like
For
I
sure.
I, I think there's just 2 strategies, right? Which is, one is like what we do is a lot of repurposing. We grow extremely linearly and very slow. We don't really have a lot of like viral hits, versus like, because I'm also like spreading our content team is basically like me and like a handful of other people and then a bunch of people in the Philippines. Um, and it's really, yeah, like basically like if we wanted to go viral on one channel, I have to dedicate my entire time to that. I can't do anything else. Because you have to like spend a ton of time. So I think like repurposing is really good for going linearly, but you have to ultimately put a lot of effort into at least one channel. Like we're lucky that we have a lot of people working on it. So I give feedback on our podcast. So like we slowly are improving our podcast. So it's just like really, really good, you know? And then we have like someone just managing our LinkedIn. So in a sense, it's like we do a lot of like really focus and then like also repurpose. But I think the key to repurposing is just like finding people who are really, really good at it. And like I'm a really big fan of having people in the Philippines help me with that. Because you basically can build systems to do it. Um, yeah, I mean, I think you just slowly
If you
focus
if
on
somebody
like,
if someone is listening and they're thinking, look, I've been trying to implement content as media into my business, I'm gonna go ahead and try it with a VA. What should that first VA that you hire, what is the first thing you should delegate if you only have budget to hire one VA?
yeah, I mean, I think people are terrible at hiring overseas contractors. And I think the VA companies are a complete ripoff because they're marking everyone up 100 to 200% on VA salaries. And then I think it's so easy. Um, Basically, I think you add one task at a time and you do whatever you focus on. So let's say you have a podcast, right? Um, you know, you have that person like go through and find clips, right? Or you have that person go through and find quotes for Twitter and LinkedIn, but you start with one task at a time. I think what people mess up is like, you're not going to be able to hire some like a VA overseas who's like amazing at doing it right off the bat. You know, like you have to be able to work with them, so I'll give you an example. One of the people I have is a video editor who watches our podcast, cuts our clips. Like he picked out clips that made sense and were good. I was like, all right, we can work with this. And then I told him, I was like, I need you to pick out a clip before every new episode airs so we can post that clip to drive traffic to the new episode. And like this week, one of our episodes was on breast cancer, but like the clip he found was on like, how old people need community. Terrible mismatch, right? Like if that's you, you're like, okay, why did you pick a clip that has nothing to do with the title of the episode? Okay. So you tell him, hey, next week, find a clip that we like air the day of the episode that aligns with the bot, because no one told them that and they're not going to know. So my advice is like lots of looms, lots of like statement of processes, lots of examples, and just like very clear articulate. But always look at the platforms where you have the highest density of people and the lowest competition. Like the amount of people that are putting out high quality YouTube videos that are hour-long lectures that are professionally edited, that are like cutting edge topics on peptides on YouTube is just like no one. Right? So it's like, and even on LinkedIn, like there's no doctors who are going ham on like writing these long like posts that are basically like blogs every time. I would say repurpose content where like you have the highest density of consumers, but like the lowest amount of competition.
Philip, the other thing I want to talk to you about, and I love your perspective on this, is because I know you were like literally in the short form clipping game. And one thing that you just said was like, you're like, I'm not a big fan of just taking random podcast clips and just like posting them because I don't think it really works, right? It's something that Ramon and I had done before. And I saw you when you were working on your agency, you guys literally had the most produced short form clips I'd ever seen. It was like wild the amount of production that went into them. And obviously a bunch of them did blow up. But I'd love to get your perspective on clipping as we move into, 2024. It seems like there's a bunch of services that pop up that clip. I think there's a little bit of saturation in the clipping space. But how do you envision short form as a strategy? Do you see it working? Do you see it being a little oversaturated? Like, what are your thoughts there on just short form clipping a podcast and posting it to Instagram or TikTok?
Yeah, I think like if you have a professional podcast, it's easy. Like if you have money to spend, you might as well do it, kind of, is my opinion. Like for us, it basically cost us less than $3,000 a month to do, one reel on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, cutting from our podcast. And it's like we're in a position where it's like we might as well do it. Just to like kind of diversify content and impact it. Right now we're like testing it. I'm not like we might not do it 1 or 2 months from now because I'm not sure if it's worth it. I think again it like really depends on the brand. One of like the companies that I've worked with, like they do pretty well and they're like pretty happy with the results. I think yeah, it mostly depends on your budget and bandwidth. I mean, AI tools are getting better at doing it, but again, like content is a very big power law game. So it's like if everyone is doing the bare minimum, like you're probably going to get average or the bare minimum results. Um, Versus like, if you script things out and go really hard. I also want to mention, I don't think production quality actually matters that much at all. I think the number one most important thing is audio quality. Like if you have shitty audio, you need really, really good content. I actually think visual content does not matter that much based on like things I have personally seen. Um, yeah. Yep.
That is so encouraging and valuable for anyone looking to make the leap even into making content, because if you look at some of these YouTube courses, etc., like they're starting just a camera to start is like what a grand, $1,500. The lighting setup, you think you need to set up the whole studio and have a show, and like before you know it, I mean, shoot, I mean, I might just well keep writing blogs or making short form. But I agree with you. Like, I think that the context of the content is what's most important and comes first before even the video quality, production, etc., is in the mix. Some creators are spending six figures a month. Are you guys spending media, what's it called, paid media behind the content you're making, or are you just driving the organic wave 100%?
Oh, so we do paid media on Facebook and Instagram. That was decided and run by someone else before I started. Um, I am torn on paid media because I am very tinfoil hatty. I I am the person who's like, no, we don't schedule TikToks because they're going to perform worse, and there's no real data to basically prove those things except anecdotally. But like, if you go through the logic, it's like, okay, if you're a brand and you start spending money to advertise your YouTube videos or Instagram posts or Facebook posts, like, do you really think these platforms are going to want to promote you much as organic, right? Like, they want to make money off you. Like, don't quote me on this, might be wrong. I'm almost positive I've heard that like TikTok will suppress your organic post if you run ad spend or are a brand account because they want you to have, like, you have the money to run the ads, right? So I'm like, really, I don't have a clear cut decision on this. I will tell you, we don't run ads on our YouTube account. And I'm like, again, and we don't run ads on our YouTube account because I think it hurts organic. We stopped running ads on Facebook and our organic fell. Well, no, our organic grew when we stopped running ads on Facebook, but like overall posts obviously go down. Um, yeah, so we don't necessarily do it to grow our like we did in the past, but I'm not as big a fan on that because it's like, yeah, it's just you want to make sure your content's good. It's not just because you're spending money, because obviously Facebook and Instagram is going to make it work if you are spending money. But I don't think that's how you build a cult of people. And you want a cult, like you don't want followers. Followers are worthless. You want a cult.
Philip, as we wrap up here, my last question is just going to be a pretty easy one. But like, if you're a creator and you have like one platform or not platform, if you have like, what is the biggest trend, I guess, in 2024 that if you're a creator, you should be leaning into to grow?
Okay, this is irrespective of Rupa Health. My personal opinion is Twitter. I'm super biased. I think Twitter is the best positioned because if you look at all the platforms, basically the only thing that, you know, you have to look at all the platforms and what they have that no one else does, right? And the only three things that I can think of is like, one, LinkedIn. Nobody has resume. Like no one's going to ever compete with LinkedIn because no one's going to really ever be able to duplicate the professional network that LinkedIn has. The other one is like kind of YouTube's ad revenue, right? Like, is anyone going to like be able to copy how YouTube pays creators? Twitter is literally doing that. I got paid $150 for my tweets. Like, you don't get paid as much, but hopefully you'll get there. But what Twitter has that no one else has is real time news. And people make content on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else based on what happens on Twitter. So my whole thing about like what platforms get disrupted, what has the staying power is nobody has real time news like Twitter. And I think Elon is just like super dedicated to making Twitter work. Long form videos get pushed. They're obviously going to have short form videos on Twitter soon. So I personally am bullish on Twitter. And the one thing I really want to plug this because this is my new learning past 3 months, which is like when creating content, my biggest suggestion is like just doing what is authentic. And the best example I can think of is like I've tried to grow my Twitter for 2 years. And there was 3 times in my life where I sat down and I wrote like a Twitter thread every day and I tried to grow it and I did all the right things and I did all the hacks I did in short form and nothing worked. And then Tara, the CEO of Twitter, goes viral all the time. And she's one of my close friends. I was like, all right, no, like, why do you go viral all the time and I don't? What are you doing? And she's like, oh, whenever I thought, I just sit down, I write it, and I tweet. I was like, all right, I'm going to try that. Like, I'm not going to schedule anything. I'm not going to try. I'm just going to use this as a public journal. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm just going to write what I like. I did 10 million views in 1 week. And I was like, all right, this is it. So when it comes to creating content, I'm very big on just like being super authentic, doing what you really enjoy. And I now am very much less like come up with like, don't try and just like figure out what works. Is like Blaine, to answer your question, what is the trends? Like the Think Boy Twitter threads don't really work anymore because everybody uses it. And that's the problem with copying whatever works and what everyone's using is like no one's going to ever be able to copy my original thoughts and content that works on Twitter because it's just me being me. Right. But if you use these formulas to like consistently go viral or whatever, like it'll work for a short time period, but it will not work forever.
I was
I
just
think
going to
that's
say,
really funny.
no, Ramon, I was just going to say, I think Philip's, what he said about the power law and content and something we talk about is so, so important because like content's a copycat world. And if something's working, people are going to see it working and then they're going to just do whatever else is working. So like the name of the game in content is like, how do you stay ahead of the curve and how do you, skate to where the puck's going instead of just copying what's already been done? Ramon, I'll let you chime in for the last word.
Yeah, no, Philip, I also was writing a bunch of threads and stuff on X, and they weren't performing, and I just made my dream work from home setup on Mid Journey, and I tweeted it, and it just like I've been back to back viral on like these work from home setups, and people are asking like, is it real? Is it not? And so I'm like, man, I was spending all this time trying to write X and X entrepreneur story, wasn't working. I just share my work from home setup. And so it opened up my worldview of like Twitter. And Blaine and I were playing golf the other day, and I just looked to my side and I say, Blaine, I think X is like the most underrated and is gonna be the go-to media because Elon boycotting like the advertisers and like for the greater good. I'm like, I'm kind of developing this thesis that maybe social media platforms shouldn't be public companies because they're in the interest of the shareholders and too many politics involved. And X is the complete opposite of that. So I totally agree with you. I am all in on X as well.
Sweet. Well, Philip, for anyone who's tuning in, wants to learn more about you and follow along with you on Twitter or any of the other stuff that you're doing, why don't you shout out your socials and where we can connect with you?
Oh yeah, Twitter is the only thing I use now because I personally don't like making content because once you get on the hamster wheel, you can never get off. So it's just Philip with 1L underscore Ruffini, Ruffini, on X, Twitter.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. We had a great time.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me, Blaine.
Thank you, Phil.